Hello everyone, welcome back to Spurs in the Stands. I'm Sarah, and today we're talking about the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust minutes from the meeting which happened on February the 3rd. And I mentioned a few videos back that I was going to dive more into this, but it turns out the minutes have just been released. And we had a conversation, you and I, for those of you that have been around long enough, about the survey, the results that came out. I think we did that in a live a few days ago. So if anyone wants to go and check that out, we obviously now have more information about the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust and how that meeting went down. And there's some stuff that I really think is important to draw our attention to. And some of the questions that you guys have been asking me as my position as a transformational coach and the transformation that's going on at Tottenham Hotspur and why we keep failing, why we keep going through this cycle again and again of hiring managers, of not hiring the right players, or let's say players not reaching their full potential, or for whatever reasons, that this club is not evolving to its next level that it should be, given the fact that we are now in this state-of-the-art stadium and the expectation is that Tottenham Hotspur should be competing across all fronts. So to dive into this topic, look, guys, there's so much stuff that I want to talk about. So we're going to save that for a live. But just to say, if you are new around here, welcome aboard, because I see that there's some new faces and names in the chat. It was really interesting yesterday, actually, to see some Newcastle fans giving their opinion on the Amanda Staveley conversation and the potential takeover that might be happening come March. So there's a lot going on at Tottenham Hotspur right now. So like, subscribe, share with your mates, hype, do all of the things, because it really does help support the channel. And we are creating a COYS collective of Spurs fans that are optimistic about the future, despite the fact that what I'm about to share with you might be to the contrary. So let's dive into it. I tried to share my screen before, but it wasn't coming up with the full screen. So look, for those of you out there that don't really know too much about the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, just to frame this for you. So the Trust is a formal democratic non-profit organization led by fans for fans. So they are the official communicator or bridge between the fan base and the club itself. Of course, we know there's change for Spurs. We know that there's other organizations out there that are pushing the narrative or advocating for change. However, the only organization that Tottenham Hotspur communicate with on a regular basis are the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, to the extent that they meet formally 3 times a year with the club at board level. So they have insight over certain conversations that happen. They are the ones that push the narratives around transport, around ticketing prices, around the fans' general sense and feeling around the club and what the club can do to help the club stay on track and progress ultimately and have greater success for the future. So the minutes came out today, and if anyone's interested in reading these minutes, you can go over to X and look up the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. They have just tweeted it, and it takes you to a page which gives you an overview plus the minutes. Now, before I dive into the minutes, because look, I don't want to take this line by line, because from what it looks like, it's a 3-page document. It's a bulletproof exercise. There really is limited information on this document itself. And to be quite honest, we don't really have any greater insight about the direction of the board from this conversation or from this board meeting that happened with the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. However, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because sometimes the absence of answers or the silence is more revealing than the answers themselves. And for me personally, I'm actually really frustrated reading this, because just to give you a sense, what they've done is on their website, they've given an outline of the conversations or the lines or the paragraphs that haven't made it into the minutes themselves. And the first thing that has not been included, and these things that have been omitted, were the decision of the board members that were in that room. And to give you a sense, the representatives from the club were Vinay Venkatesan, Kate Miller, Jake Heath, who is the head of supporter engagement, and Ellen Young, who is the business operations lead. So they were the ones, along with the Supporters Trust, who is Michael Green, the chair, Tristan Foot, the secretary, and a couple of other board members. So the actual members in the meeting they're the heavyweights at the club. And the first line that was not included in these minutes, it says, the club declined to include the descriptions of our 5 principles of ownership. So essentially, the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust did a survey back in January. It was open for the whole of January, and the club scored unanimously, scores averaging about 2 out of 10 across each of their 5 principles of ownership. So they were committing to winning, attract and retaining talent, future-proofing success, lead with integrity, and fans first. So I think what's really revealing about all of this is the fact that the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust is supposed to be the official representation, or representative, shall we say, of fans. And the first thing that comes out is the club don't agree with the descriptions of the 5 principles of ownership, which in and of itself is barbaric. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Come on, guys. Like, how can you have, like, at the very least, from the board side, what I would expect, if they're saying that the club's ownership has changed and therefore the 5 principles of ownership should change with that, then they need to be outlining what they think the 5 principles of ownership should be. It's ridiculous. Like, how can you not have any principles of ownership? And this is what I was talking about in previous videos when I was saying this board don't have a direction. They're shooting in the dark. They honestly have absolutely no idea of the direction or what they stand for as the owners. And the reason why we're not succeeding comes back to coaching, because ultimately, if you set a superficial goal, which is to compete on all fronts, but don't back it up with the intentional action, which is conducive to meeting your requirements of the very objectives that you set out, then you are setting yourself up for failure, because that desire to compete on all fronts is unfounded. There's nothing behind it. It's superficial. And this is the whole reason why Tottenham Hotspur is currently failing as a football club. Like, it's insane. Anyway, the other points that go on that I wanted to highlight in this was the paragraph was omitted, which said the club had not filed financial statements demonstrating that it was able to generate profit since 2018 and needed the cash generated by the share issue of cash flow purposes. In other words, the club's not in profit and they've had to leverage other assets from elsewhere in order to reinvest into the club. Now, I think it's kind of fair from the board's perspective that maybe they take the stance that because we've moved into the new stadium and because we're paying off heavy debts, they're not making a profit because those debts are being repaid, and therefore the profits aren't showing on the balance sheet. Having said that, of course, we know that we finished 17th last year. So from a perspective of, match day money that comes in, like, that's probably gone down over the past year. But the fact that they're not able to demonstrate it, or they haven't filed financial statements which reveal why they haven't generated the profit, because of course I'm just speculating here of why that might be, is the very reason why this club is failing in the first place, because they have this problem with the wage structure and the conversation. I mean, look, Ange came out and said we're a small club. He didn't say that. He said they're a small club in terms of wages. And look, we know that the problem at the moment with this club is that the wage bill is way below where we need to be in order to compete on all fronts. In other words, get into top 4. So the fact that they don't have, or they haven't filed the financial statements and able to show why it's okay if you haven't generated profit. I think most people understand that because we've moved into the new stadium, because we have had all these expenses and these debts, it kind of makes sense. But to not be able to explain it and justify it just shows the gaping hole behind the scenes, because if you don't know your finances, if you can't have the awareness to publicly come out and announce that, then the very reason reason why you're not spending in the way that's aligned with where you want to get to is because you have a gaping hole in the fact that you don't understand your own financial position. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So this problem is bigger than Spurs don't have a wage structure that competes. The bigger crux of this problem is that they don't have the awareness and the visibility behind that to understand how to move forward. And it's deeply, deeply, deeply worrying, guys. Like for me, this is like, it's just a lack of, it's not even a lack of alignment. Like it's just a lack of direction. And that reinforces what's said a bit later, because I'm not going to go through all of this, but the last couple of points. So a line that was omitted was that the club welcomed the input of the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. So effectively, in the minutes, they took out the phrase that said the club welcomed the input of Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. In other words, they're not listening to us. They're not listening to the fans. And the fact that they sacked Frank was probably down to the fact that the fans were so loud in the stadium, because clearly these open dialogues and supposed to be constructive conversations are not constructive, because they're not working collaboratively. And when you don't have collaboration, that is when you have fragmentation. And so the board might be sitting there wondering why everyone's so distracted, why everyone's jumping all these trains, and why everyone's so divided by things. Well, it's because you're not uniting us. You're not uniting the fans. You're not hearing the voice of the fans. And this is deeply, deeply worrying, as with all of this. Now, the last paragraph that was omitted from these minutes, it said, Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust asked to see the underlying KPIs behind each of the strategic principles. These had not yet been agreed by the club internally. Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust stated that the detail of these KPIs were important. If the strategic objectives were geared towards winning trophies, this should be directly referenced in the KPIs. If, however, the KPIs referenced European qualification, i.e. a stated desire of the previous ownership, and we know that Levy spoke about European qualification, this could suggest that the club was prioritizing financial performance over football performance. And this, for me, guys, is the absolute kicker. I want to hear what you guys think about this. Please, please, please do go over and have a look at these minutes, because this last point, it was like a gut punch, because I have been talking about how you set goals. And the reason why people don't set goals is because they don't know why and they don't know how, and they don't have a direction for the club. And ultimately, what this comes down to is selfish greed from the board. And look, people might not like that opinion, and I think most people by now understand the ENIC board turmoil that is causing the turmoil to filter down at all levels. But look, when you set a goal, you have to have a KPI. Like, how can you say we want to compete on all fronts and then not have a strategic principle to back that up? Like it says, these have not yet been agreed internally by the club. Do you understand how mad that is? To have a KPI that's set out that says we need to win, and then not to set parameters of what that actually means is more, it does more harm than good. It does more harm than good. And the reason why it does more harm than good, and we've seen this play out, is because then they make these rash statements like we're going to compete on all fronts, and then you finish 17th. So it's got me really, really annoyed, to be completely honest, when I've read this. The minutes themselves are literally just like bullet points of, you know, what the club's so a bullet point says, you know, the club's strategic direction, delivering plans against stated priorities. I mean, look, it's nonsense. Like I understand and I appreciate all of the work that the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust do, because I actually didn't realise how involved they are, how involved they try to be. The bigger challenge is that there's no collaboration. There is no collaboration between the board and the fans. And this, guys, is just... it's so bad. It's so bad, because at the very least, you can pretend that you're listening. The truth is, they're not even listening. They're not even listening. And so what it took to sack Thomas Frank was for the whole stadium to be booing the manager, for them to take any action. And so the fact that they've not set out any KPIs, the fact that they've omitted the line which says that they agree with the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust 5 principals. The fact that they haven't been able to reveal their financial statements to be able to demonstrate that they are financially profitable as an organization. And even if that's not the case, explain why that has been the case. It just shows that our cash flow situation could be so much worse behind the scenes than what we actually think it is. And part of that reason is because we have this manager merry-go-round, because we're buying players that aren't fit for purpose, that are fit for old systems. We sell players at a loss. Just the whole thing, guys, absolutely stinks. Anyway, this is turning into a rant. It didn't mean to turn into a rant, but I wanted to share this with you today because, look, whether you're on board with Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, whether you're on board with Change for Spurs, whether you want ENIC out, whatever your position is, the truth of the matter is the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust represents us as the fans, and they got a survey done with over 4,500 people. And so if the noise and the voice of the fans is not being listened to, and the club don't want to take that on board, and moreover than that, they don't have the foresight to go ahead and set their own objectives, this club is going nowhere. This club is going absolutely nowhere, because until they can prove to us that their finances are in order, that their KPIs are in check, that they are listening to fans, you are going to keep seeing more division. And the only way out of this, other than them actually listening to us, is for a takeover. That's it. Bottom line, there has to be a takeover. And part of me thinks, and some of you were commenting on my video yesterday, because I was talking about, Amanda Staveley and everything like that. And you guys were saying, well, is the 6 months up? Because she made that offer back in October. And so once it was refused, there's a 6-month cooling off period before you can bid again. And we are coming up to that window, guys. We are coming up to that window. It's going to be, I think it's going to be March the 6th from what I've heard. But look, we've had rumours that the takeover is going to be March and April. So part of me in the back of my mind is thinking, is the reason why ENIC hasn't set out KPIs and objectives because they know there's going to be a takeover? Or are they that incompetent that they can't even get themselves together to draw up some very, very simple KPIs? Because look, even if you fail to achieve your KPIs, at least you set them. At least you set the trajectory. At least you set the intention of where you want to go. What's so much worse than that is having a dartboard in front of you and there's no bullseye and you're just hitting randomly because you're never going to win at anything. Anyway, guys, this is really very frustrating for me. Where do you guys sit on this? Has anyone seen the minutes? Has anyone looked into this? What are your thoughts on this? Do you find this as worrying as me, the fact that the board aren't able to describe or go into any sort of detail about what their KPIs are? Do you have any concerns about the fact that, they are dismissing the current injury crisis? Because that was another paragraph that was omitted. The fact that young players are not coming through to the academy and players are on loan repeatedly. They removed that paragraph. And so sometimes, guys, it's not about what is being said. It's about what's not being said. And if you're going to admit some of the most heavy-weighted questions and the things that really matter in terms of what the fans care about and in terms of winning and in terms of the evolution and growth of this club, then we are set up for failure. And that is all I've got to say on the matter. So guys, I'll see you all tomorrow in the next video. Bye for now.